Hello, and thanks for tuning in. This presentation will cover an innovative option that any type of educator in any space can apply to make learning activities that build 21st century skills and experiences. Here's an overview so you know where we are headed in this presentation. We will start with some background information about the problems we perceive in current learning environment setups with a focus on secondary education and the research question we developed as a result. We will then dive into some practical solutions, including real-world examples that have been piloted and potential steps that you can take to implement these ideas in your learning environment. So here's the problem. When thinking about learning spaces, we notice a number of limitations that could prevent a teacher from effectively integrating 21st century learning experiences into a typical class environment. As an example, think of the basic classroom setup like the one shown here. Learners are confined to be seated in uncomfortable, hard chairs attached to desks that cannot move. They are lined up in rows with the teacher space at the front of the room or around the perimeter. Especially as learners move throughout the educational system, their learning spaces seem to become less creative and interactive over time and look more and more like mini lecture halls in every room. In fact, the secondary classroom setup hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Even with a smartboard replacing a chalkboard, the premise is the same. Students sit still and take information in from an expert with a focus primarily on content. An educator who wants to change this setup has limited options due to the time and cost that's needed to transform from a lecturing and direct instruction design into a learner-centered, technology-integrated space that fosters 21st century skills like collaboration, creativity, problem-solving, and critical thinking. Our group will focus on secondary learners and how digitally enhanced classrooms can foster 21st century learning. In particular, we want to understand how different pedagogical aims can be integrated into one system that meets the needs of diverse young people in terms of their interests, readiness, and learning styles. Knowing the problems and limitations, our idea is to design zones within classrooms that are dedicated to different skills, experiences, technology, and types of learning, which could also be adaptable to any subject area, space, and learner preferences. Our guiding question is, how can today's secondary school environments be adapted to foster learner-centered, technology-driven, 21st century skill building using flexible learning zones throughout the room? A brief overview of how learning zones could work. So a teacher would set up multiple zones that cater to different experiences throughout the same room, including the types of technology available, whether learners work alone in groups or directly with the teacher, if they're standing or sitting, and so on. Learners can choose which space is most conducive to the task at hand, or they can be moved based on teacher instructions. This enables every student to be engaged in his or her learning activity and to allow different modes of learning to happen simultaneously.
We know from the work of Vygotsky that humans learn best when working within their zones of proximal development. The idea of zoning a classroom extends this idea from the individual to the community. The delineation of zones within a classroom not only gives permission to students to learn in their own ways and styles, but allows them to recognize that each person learns differently and identify the ways they learn best. 7 zones have been deemed essential for the modern classroom by several researchers, but I will use Veronica Lopez's blog from Edutopia as my reference. These zones mimic the work environment as places to learn, practice, and polish the 21st century skills that are needed as students transition from high school to college and/or career. The identified zones are the discovery zone, the news zone, the supplies zone, the community zone, the quiet zone, the teacher zone, and the subject zone. Technology is integrated into each zone with various devices and charging station for personal ones. The discovery zone is the jumping-off place to explore new concepts. This zone houses manipulatives, cameras, recorders, games, puzzles, etc. The discovery zone incorporates STEM activities that create relevance to other disciplines and encourage students to explore beyond the confines of the classroom subject. Students are led to the idea that they are not learning for the sake of learning, but applying what they have learned to the real world. The discovery zone teaches students how to learn and how to become lifelong learners through a linked environment. The teacher's role in the Discovery Zone is to provide guiding questions, redirect and connect ideas from the classroom to real-world application. Clear expectations and goals are necessary in the Discovery Zone. Innovation and creativity are 21st century skills that are highlighted in this ever-important zone. The News Zone, much as the name implies, is the go-to place for assignments, daily objectives, upcoming internal events, and access to global events. This space could be as simple as a dedicated section of a classroom whiteboard, but must be consistent. Students need to know that this is the place to go to find the news. The teacher's role is to keep the News Zone updated, whether doing this personally or, better yet, with students to keep the news updated and relevant to current events. Dissemination of information and resource validity are highlighted in the News Zone. The Supplies Zone houses the general classroom supplies needed to accomplish tasks: paper, pencils, highlighters, sticky notes, paper clips, staplers, pencil sharpeners, all the minor interruptions that cause students and teachers to lose concentration. The Supplies Zone is a sanity saver. The teacher's role is to keep the Supply Zone, well, supplied. Organizational and time management skills are the 21st century skills learned in the Supply Zone. With so many responsibilities and commitments, time management is critical for 21st century citizens. The Community Zone is one of the larger zones in the classroom and can serve multiple uses if designed well. Students gather here for collaboration and group work. This space is used to pose questions, make connections, present alternative perspectives, clarify, and evaluate. Through technology, the Community Zones brings resources into the classroom. Interactive applications such as Skype would make the Community Zone host to a guest speaker or an expert who might otherwise be unable to visit a classroom in person. A whiteboard, projector, document camera, and the needed accessories for each will be readily available in the Community Zone for project presentation and brainstorming. Flexible seating makes the Community Zone easily adaptable to pairs, small groups, individual teacher-to-student interaction, and even parent conferences outside classroom. Be aware an inviting and well-equipped Community Zone may also be used for teacher collaboration. The teacher's role in the Community Zone becomes facilitator. Whether through direct whole group instruction or small individualized instruction, this zone becomes the place for collaboration. Expectations and role assignments must be clear, and as students learn how to collaborate and communicate effectively and respectfully. To accommodate the students who prefer to work alone, need additional study time, or simply need a break from the stimulation of other students, a quiet zone provides this solitude. Outfitted with comfortable furniture and appropriate lighting, this space gives those students a place to disconnect and recenter themselves. Extra earbuds or noise-canceling headphones are found in the area so students can truly escape. The teacher's role in the quiet zone may take the look of counselor, conflict mediator, or just-in-time facilitator, but once again, expectations of the quiet zone must be communicated along with justification for its purpose. Just as important as collaboration is time to reflect on collaboration. Although humans are social beings, it is imperative that students learn to process the thoughts and perceptions of others to their own schemas. Much like the quiet zone for students, the teacher zone is his or her place to escape. This space is your home away from home, where you might display personal items to illustrate to your students that you are a human as well as a teacher. This is also your professional space, where you can plan, evaluate, reflect, analyze data, assess, and adjust your impact on the classroom. This space is your personal space, and students should be clear on this. If all other zones in the room are properly equipped and facilitated, students will not have a need to be in the teacher zone. Additionally, teachers who are managing a classroom and ensuring student engagement will have little time to spend in their zone during class time, with the exception of daily housekeeping tasks that must be attended to. Finally, the subject zone identifies the subject taught in the classroom. Also important in the subject zone are representations that reflect the interconnectedness between subjects and how relevance extends beyond the classroom. The teacher's role in the subject zone is again facilitator and manager. Provide timely additions and updates as content changes throughout the school year. The connections between academic learning and real-world application in the subject zone work with the discovery zone to convey to students that there is no time limit to learning, and in an ever-changing world, we must continue to synthesize what we have learned to the changes that are continual.
I apologize right away for my stuffy voice. My allergies are kicking up. But to continue on with our group's presentation, we just want to give you an idea of what learning zones in action could look like. So in Europe, there's an organization called European SchoolNet, and it is a collaborative organization amongst 32 different ministries, or as we know them in America, school districts. And their goal within this organization was to create a future classroom lab, or FCL. And through this collaborative effort, the first FCL was actually implemented within a classroom in Brussels, Belgium. And in this FCL, 6 different learning zones were utilized, and then they were named in accordance with 21st century learning skills. And the 6 zones were investigate, create, exchange, develop, interact, and present. And within these 6 different learning zones, even more 21st century learning skills were hit. So for an example, in investigate, students would be utilizing critical thinking and problem solving skills with themselves as individuals, but also with their peers to ideally solve a problem. So the key here within this FCL is that the onus of the learning is being put on the students. They're able to work through these different zones to ultimately engage themselves in the learning process, while the teacher is there to guide them through that learning process in these 6 different zones. So now, with that example in mind, I just want to begin this practical applications for you in the present and for your future endeavors, maybe delving into this idea of using zones in your classroom. The key is that simplicity is important right away. You do not have to go big or go home right away. And really the main thing to do when you're using zones is to keep everything simple for the students. Okay, so if you're using a quiet zone like we've mentioned, maybe you would use a certain type of furniture like couches or beanbag chairs to show students, like, here's your place to relax, here's your place to be quiet and reflect on your learning, or to do some reading and just be alone with yourself. Another key is to set boundaries. Physical boundaries for students, so that they have an expectation within that zone and within that space that you set for them. And then finally, make sure that you keep your students at the forefront of your design. Use their strengths to not only guide you to what zones should be in the classroom, but have their strengths guide them to the zones that also work best for them.
In terms of practical application, do not let your current classroom size or its configuration be your kryptonite. You can set up a learning zone in a bookcase, on a shelf, on a bulletin board, or even a small desk or table. You do not have to create all the discussed learning zones. Start with whichever zone will help you the most, or start at the beginning and see where it takes you. The key takeaway is it's difficult to expand innovative instruction and learning without innovating the learning environment as well. It's time to roll up your sleeves and get to work. Are you updating your classroom or your school to accommodate the next generation of learners? Please accept this invitation to share your ideas, plans, and examples of creative and innovative learning spaces. To further stimulate thought in the discussion, think about the following questions. Have you ever made any formal or informal learning environments in your classroom? If so, how did it go? Which of the zones do you believe could be easiest to implement right now in your classroom? Are there any other zones that you can envision that we may not have discussed that will help your learners? And what other questions, ideas, or concerns might you have at this time? On behalf of Group 5, I want to thank you for viewing our presentation. And as always, we appreciate your feedback. Thank you.